round columns. It's a massive internal complex. But what's intriguing and stupefies a lot of people is that below the surface is where you find the megalithic. This is the Osirion. You can see there's water in it. The water is coming up from the ground. The question is, how much older is this?
There is something buried beneath Egypt that history was never meant to explain. In 1902, archaeologists broke through the desert floor at Abydos and descended 50 feet into darkness, where they found a colossal stone structure submerged in ancient water, with no records, no markings, and no right to exist.
Where there's cuts, vertical cuts, where quite clearly either parts of them have either been tried to be broken off.
Why was there no sign of it on the surface? And how does a monument of this scale simply vanish from history? As torchlight cut through the black water and revealed massive granite walls, the excavation team fell silent. Because this wasn't a forgotten tomb. It was something far older, far heavier, and sitting directly beneath a pharaoh's temple as if it had been deliberately hidden. This is the Osirion, and once you understand what's wrong with it, Egyptian history starts to come apart. Egypt's lost foundation. The year was 1902.
In 1902, Flinders Petrie noticed a depression behind Seti's temple, and Algernon Caulfield began digging. But it was Hilda Petrie, Flinders' wife, who took charge, and Margaret Murray, one of the few women in the field who documented everything.
The British archaeologist Margaret Murray was leading an excavation behind the temple of Seti I at Abydos, one of the most sacred sites in ancient Egypt. Abydos had been a pilgrimage destination for thousands of years, the place where Egyptians believed Osiris, god of the dead, was buried. Seti's temple above ground was already famous for its extraordinary beauty, its delicate relief carvings considered among the finest ever created, its walls covered with the famous king lists that chronicled Egypt's pharaohs across millennia.
We're in the corridor known as the Gallery of the Lists or the Gallery of Ancestors. The list includes cartouches of 76 pharaohs beginning with the king Menes, known as Narmer, the first king of United Egypt.
Murray's team was excavating in the area behind this temple when they broke through into something unexpected. Darkness, vast darkness, and water. Ancient water that had not been disturbed for centuries, filling a space far larger than anyone anticipated. As the team brought in more light and began to comprehend what they had found, the scale became apparent. This was not a small chamber or a forgotten storage room. This was a megalithic monument. Massive granite and limestone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons each, formed walls that rose from the black water like something from a fever dream. The central hall alone measured approximately 30 meters long and 20 meters wide. Individual blocks stretched over 5 meters in length. The construction was brutal in its simplicity, stark in its power, overwhelming in its scale. And it had been sitting here, completely unknown, buried under 50 feet of Egyptian sand, submerged in groundwater, for longer than anyone could immediately determine. The discovery raised immediate questions that have never been satisfactorily answered. Well, how do you lose a megalithic monument? How does a structure this massive, this impressive, this significant, simply vanish from human knowledge?
No inscriptions, no color, no 19th dynasty flourishes, just raw, megalithic power. It doesn't look New Kingdom. Some say it doesn't even look Egyptian, it looks ancient. Lost civilization ancient.
The temple of Seti I above had been known and studied for centuries. Pilgrims and scholars had walked directly over this underground structure without any awareness of its existence. No ancient texts clearly described it. No maps marked its location. It was as if the Osirion had been deliberately erased from memory, or as if it belonged to a period so distant that even the ancient Egyptians had forgotten who built it and why. Egypt's one-off megalith. Let me be specific about what makes the Osirion's construction so difficult to explain within conventional timelines. The blocks that form this structure weigh over 100 tons each. That is the equivalent of 16 adult African elephants compressed into a single stone. That is 50 automobiles crushed together. Someone quarried these blocks from granite mountains at Aswan, over 200 kilometers to the south. Someone transported them across the desert.
This one had a very curious casing. The first 16 stones were made of red granite brought from Aswan.
A journey that would challenge modern heavy equipment. Someone positioned them with such precision that the joints remain remarkably tight after thousands of years of constant water exposure. And officially, mainstream Egyptology says this happened around 1290 BCE, during the New Kingdom, under Pharaoh Seti I. Here is where the problems begin. The New Kingdom was not an era of megalithic construction. By 1290 BCE, Egyptian builders had long since abandoned the practice of moving 100-ton blocks. They built beautiful temples with elegant columns and exquisite decoration, but they worked with smaller, more manageable stones. The age of megalithic construction belonged to the Old Kingdom, over 1,000 years earlier, when the pyramids rose at Giza and massive granite temples demonstrated capabilities that later dynasties could not match. After the Old Kingdom collapsed, something happened to Egyptian civilization. The ability to quarry and move truly massive stones seems to have disappeared. Later dynasties built impressive structures, but they did not routinely work with 100-ton blocks. That knowledge, that capability, was lost. So the Osirion presents an immediate problem. We are asked to believe that in the middle of the New Kingdom, over a millennium after megalithic construction supposedly ended, Seti I suddenly revived these abandoned techniques. He mobilized resources no other New Kingdom pharaoh ever attempted. He quarried 100-ton granite blocks and transported them 200 kilometers across the desert.
Red granite from Aswan, so it had to be moved about 200 miles, each block, to its present location.
He built a structure using methods his civilization had not practiced for 1,000 years. And then, having accomplished this extraordinary feat, he never used those techniques again for any other project. Neither did any of his successors. The megalithic capability appeared for this single structure and then vanished again. Does that sequence make sense to you? Engineer and author Christopher Dunn has spent decades analyzing Egyptian construction techniques using modern engineering principles. When he examined Osirian stonework, his assessment was direct, and the construction quality matches Old Kingdom megalithic engineering, not New Kingdom temple building. The tool marks are wrong for the official timeline. The joint precision is wrong. The sheer scale of the blocks is wrong. Everything about the Osirians' construction points to a period when moving 100-ton stones was standard practice, when this kind of work was normal rather than an extraordinary exception requiring impossible explanation. The decoration problem. Stand in the temple of Seti I and look around. You are surrounded by some of the most beautiful artwork ever created in ancient Egypt. Intricate hieroglyphics cover every surface. Delicate relief carvings depict gods and pharaohs with extraordinary skill. Sophisticated artistic programs tell stories of creation, death, and resurrection with a refinement that still takes your breath away. This temple represents the absolute pinnacle of New Kingdom craftsmanship.
So, I mean, like everybody says, oh, Old Kingdom, you can't beat it. It's nonsense. The New Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, they all had great architects and engineers.
Seti I was obsessed with decoration. He was obsessed with recording his achievements. He covered his temple with inscriptions celebrating his reign, his conquests, his devotion to the gods. The man documented everything. Now descend into the Osirion. The contrast is so stark it feels like entering a different world. Massive blocks rise from the water with almost no decoration at all. No hieroglyphics explain the structure's purpose. No inscriptions dedicate it to Seti or any pharaoh. No artistic programs tell stories or celebrate achievements. The walls are blank. The granite is bare. The architectural philosophy is completely different. prioritizing overwhelming scale and stark simplicity over decorative refinement. This is not a temple. This is a statement, and it says nothing. Think about what we are being asked to accept. The same pharaoh, during the same reign, built two structures separated by mere meters that look like they come from entirely different civilizations. One is covered with the finest decoration in Egypt. The other is almost completely undecorated. One uses standard New Kingdom construction with manageable stones and elegant columns. The other uses megalithic blocks that dwarf anything else built in that era. One is thoroughly documented with inscriptions explaining its purpose and celebrating its creator. The other is silent, leaving no records, no dedication texts, no foundation deposits explaining why it exists or who built it. The official explanation for this contradiction is something called archaism. According to mainstream Egyptology, Seti intentionally built the Osirion to look ancient and primitive. He wanted it to appear old, to honor Osiris by creating a symbolic connection with Egypt's distant past. He deliberately copied construction techniques from over 1,000 years earlier to give the structure an archaic appearance. Basically, the argument is that Seti threw a costume party for a building. Here is why that explanation collapses under examination. Egyptian archaism was real. Pharaohs sometimes referenced older artistic styles or used old-fashioned hieroglyphic forms to connect their work with ancient traditions. But archaism meant copying decorative motifs. It meant stylistic choices in art and text. It meant making things look old through surface treatment and artistic convention. Archaism did not mean quarrying 100-ton granite blocks. It did not mean transporting them 200 kilometers across the desert. It did not mean constructing an entire megalithic complex using engineering methods that had been abandoned for over a millennium. That is not archaism. That is the resurrection of dead technology.
The Osirion is thousands of years older than history says, that it's proof of lost technology, of a civilization wiped from memory.
That is somehow recovering capabilities your civilization lost 1,000 years ago, deploying them for a single project, and then forgetting them again immediately afterward. And here is the part that should make you deeply suspicious. Seti I left no construction records for the Osirion. None. For a pharaoh who meticulously documented every building achievement, who covered his temple with inscriptions celebrating his reign, who recorded his accomplishments with obsessive thoroughness, this silence is deafening. It is not just unusual, it is inexplicable unless we consider the possibility that Seti did not actually build the Osirion at all. Egypt's 1,200-year time paradox. Now I need to show you something that turns this mystery from interesting to explosive. Because when you compare the Osirion to one specific structure at Giza, the official timeline does not just crack, it shatters completely. The Valley Temple sits at Giza as part of the pyramid complex, dated to approximately 2500 BCE. It was built during the 4th dynasty, the golden age of pyramid construction, when Egyptian civilization was at its absolute technical peak. The Valley Temple uses massive granite blocks. It features minimal decoration. It embodies an architectural philosophy of overwhelming scale and stark simplicity, prioritizing imposing monumentality over decorative refinement. The construction is brutal, powerful, and unlike anything built in later Egyptian periods. Place photographs of the Valley Temple and the Osirion side by side. They could be twins, the same materials, the same scale of blocks, the same construction philosophy, the same stark, almost brutal simplicity. The same architectural DNA runs through both structures. They look like they were built by the same civilization, using the same techniques during the same era. And the Valley Temple is dated over 1,200 years before Seti I was even born. This is not a minor stylistic similarity. This is precise architectural matching across supposedly impossible time distances. Either Seti perfectly replicated construction techniques from 1,200 years earlier for a single project, left it completely undecorated, created no records explaining it, and never used those techniques again, Or the Osirion belongs to the same era as the Valley Temple, built during the Old Kingdom, when such construction was standard practice. One explanation requires accepting multiple impossible coincidences. The other requires revising one date in Egyptian chronology. Which sounds more likely to you? Abydos Lost Monument. The geological evidence is where this mystery becomes impossible to ignore. Dr. Robert Schoch, the Boston University geologist who shook Egyptology with his analysis of water erosion on the Great Sphinx, examined the Osirion's weathering patterns. What he found made him question everything he thought he knew about Egyptian chronology. The erosion on those granite blocks does not match a structure that is 3,300 years old. The water damage is too extensive. The weathering is too severe. The stone surfaces show degradation patterns that suggest far greater age than the official timeline allows. When researchers analyzed the Osirion's blocks in detail, they found erosion patterns that create a direct crisis for conventional dating. Extensive water damage marks surfaces that have been exposed to moisture for extraordinary periods.
The center, a shallow rectangular slot, cracked and worn, likely damaged by later Coptic activity, not deep but deliberate.
Long-term environmental exposure has left signatures that weathering experts associate with far older structures. The degradation is more severe than anything that should have developed in 33 centuries. And here is the critical comparison. The Osirion and Seti's temple directly above it are supposedly the same age, built at the same time in the same location. If that were true, their weathering should be comparable. It is not even close. The Osirion looks centuries older than the temple above it, possibly millennia older. John Anthony West, the independent Egyptologist, whose work on Sphinx erosion forced mainstream archaeology to confront deeply uncomfortable questions, visited the Osirion and went quiet. What he saw confirmed his deepest suspicions about Egyptian chronology. This structure belongs to a different chapter of Egyptian history entirely, a chapter that official timelines refuse to acknowledge. The weathering evidence tells a story that contradicts the textbooks, and the textbooks are not interested in listening. The water mystery. The Osirion sits at the water table. This is not an accident. Its central chamber is permanently flooded, creating a haunting island effect where a raised platform emerges from dark, still water.
Water out of the Osirion so they could really get to the chambers below and see what the hell was going on.
For most of the year, visitors cannot access the interior because the water levels are too high. The structure exists in permanent semi-submersion, surrounded by ancient groundwater that gives it an otherworldly atmosphere unlike anything else in Egypt. Here is what makes this significant. This was not accidental flooding from poor planning or unexpected water table changes. The engineering suggests deliberate, intentional design. The foundations are built to handle constant moisture exposure. The blocks are massive enough to resist hydraulic pressure that would destroy lesser construction. The joints are tight enough to prevent catastrophic structural failure even after thousands of years underwater. Someone intentionally built a megalithic structure to exist permanently submerged. They understood groundwater levels with precision. They engineered foundations to resist constant water exposure. They created a building designed to last millennia underwater. Why would anyone do that unless they understood something we do not? Egyptian creation mythology describes the primordial mound emerging from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. The first land rose from dark water, and from that land, creation began. The Osirion literally recreates this cosmic scene, an island rising from dark water, a physical representation of creation itself. The symbolism is unmistakable and profound. But here is the unsettling question that researchers cannot shake. Was this just symbolic representation? Or were the builders encoding knowledge about something far more ancient, preserving memory of events or capabilities that we have forgotten? Some researchers speculate the flooded chamber served functional purposes beyond mere symbolism. The acoustic properties of water-filled stone spaces are extraordinary. Sound behaves differently when surrounded by water. Resonance changes in ways that are difficult to replicate. Frequencies amplify and transform. Was the Osirion designed to create specific acoustic effects during ancient rituals? Was it some kind of machine whose purpose we no longer understand? We do not know. We cannot know without evidence that has not yet been found. But the engineering required for permanent submersion, while maintaining structural integrity for thousands of years, exceeds typical New Kingdom construction by a significant margin. It is more consistent with Old Kingdom capabilities when Egyptian builders were at their absolute technical peak, constructing the pyramids and monuments that still defy complete explanation.
For thousands of years, it's been one of the world's great mysteries. Just how were the pyramids built so deep in the Egyptian desert?
The alternative theory. What if the Osirion was not built by Seti I at all? What if it is genuinely Old Kingdom construction, or even older, built during the period when such megalithic work was normal practice? What if it was then buried over centuries by sand and silt until it vanished completely from human knowledge, becoming invisible beneath the Egyptian landscape? What if Seti discovered this ancient structure when he began building his temple at Abydos around 1290 BCE, either breaking through into it during construction or knowing of its existence through old priestly records that have since been lost? This single theory explains everything that the official timeline cannot. The architecture matches Old Kingdom construction because it is Old Kingdom construction. The weathering shows greater age because the structure is genuinely older. The lack of New Kingdom decoration exists because no New Kingdom pharaoh built the core structure. The extraordinary depth beneath the surface resulted from millennia of gradual burial before Seti ever arrived at the site. The absence of construction records makes sense because Seti did not construct it. He discovered it. He incorporated it into his complex. He added connecting passages and transitional elements. He claimed the prehistoric monument as the symbolic tomb of Osiris, connecting his own mortuary complex to the most ancient and sacred structure he could find. Look at where the hieroglyphic evidence supposedly connecting the Osirion to Seti actually appears. It is sparse. It is found primarily in connecting passages and outer areas, exactly where you would expect inscriptions if a pharaoh discovered an older structure and claimed it by building around it. The core megalithic hall, those massive granite blocks rising from the water, bears no inscriptions definitively dating it to anyone's reign. Nothing connects those stones to Seti except their physical proximity to his temple. The assumption of New Kingdom construction is exactly that, an assumption, and assumptions can be wrong. Osirion, secrets in stone. Here is the uncomfortable reality. Mainstream Egyptology will not touch this theory. The signs at Abydos credit Seti. Guidebooks place the Osirion firmly in the 19th dynasty. The official narrative remains locked in place, defended not with evidence, but with institutional inertia. The textbooks say what they say, and changing textbooks is harder than moving 100-ton granite blocks. Yet privately, engineers who have examined the construction express serious doubts. Geologists who have analyzed the weathering patterns admit the evidence does not fit the timeline. Stone specialists who have studied the block placement see Old Kingdom techniques, not New Kingdom methods. The cognitive dissonance is real and growing. Too many experts in too many fields are looking at the same evidence and reaching the same uncomfortable conclusions. Something is wrong with the official story. Something does not fit. And the Osirion sits there in its dark water, unmoved by academic debates, holding secrets that the stones themselves reveal to anyone willing to look. The parallel with other megalithic mysteries around the world is impossible to ignore. We have already seen how Sacsayhuaman in Peru shows evidence of inherited construction, with later Inca builders adding cruder work atop megalithic foundations they could not replicate. We have seen how weathering patterns at multiple Peruvian sites suggest ages that exceed conventional chronology. The same pattern appears in Egypt. Earlier, more sophisticated construction lies at the foundation. Later, less capable builders add their own work above and around it. The quality declines rather than improves over time. The most impressive achievements appear at the beginning, not the end. This is the opposite of expected cultural development. This is the fingerprint of inheritance and knowledge loss. Beneath Seti I. I want to be clear about what we are dealing with here. This is not ancient alien speculation. This is not a mystical fantasy. This is engineering analysis, geological evidence, and architectural comparison leading to conclusions that contradict official timelines. Real scientists with real credentials are looking at real evidence and finding that it does not support the conventional narrative. The questions are legitimate. The skepticism is warranted. And the silence from mainstream institutions is telling. Why would Seti perfectly replicate construction techniques from 1,200 years earlier for a single project? Why would he mobilize resources no other New Kingdom pharaoh ever attempted? Why would he leave the structure completely undecorated despite his documented obsession with elaborate artistic programs? Why would he create no records explaining these unprecedented, extraordinary choices? Why does the weathering not match the timeline? Why does the architecture match the Valley Temple instead of New Kingdom construction? Why is this structure buried 50 feet deep when temples built on the surface in the same era are not? Why does everything about the Osirion point to a different age than the one officially assigned to it? These are not rhetorical questions. They deserve answers. And the answers currently provided by mainstream Egyptology are not satisfying. Archaism does not explain megalithic construction. Symbolic intention does not explain engineering impossibilities. Institutional consensus does not override physical evidence. The stones do not lie. The weathering does not deceive. The architectural parallels tell their own story to anyone willing to listen. The Osirion Enigma. The Osirion waits beneath Abydos today, partially accessible to visitors when water levels permit. Its massive blocks remain unmoved since the day they were placed, whenever that day actually was. The dark water still surrounds the central platform, still creates that haunting island effect that recalls Egyptian creation mythology, still holds whatever secrets this structure was built to contain. The tourists walk through Seti's temple above, admiring the beautiful reliefs and delicate carvings, often unaware that beneath their feet sits something far older and far stranger than anything the guidebooks describe. The engineering does not match the official era. The weathering does not match the official age. The architecture does not match New Kingdom construction. The documentation does not exist. The decoration does not appear. Everything that should connect this structure to Seti I is missing or contradicted by physical evidence. And yet the attribution persists because changing academic consensus is harder than accepting impossible coincidences. What if Egyptian civilization is older than we think? What if the chronology we have accepted for over a century contains errors that scholars are institutionally unwilling to correct? What if structures like the Osirion represent evidence of earlier capabilities that were lost, knowledge that disappeared, civilizations that built on scales we cannot replicate and then faded from memory? The Sphinx shows water erosion that some geologists argue indicates far greater age than official dating allows. The pyramids contain engineering achievements that modern analysis struggles to explain. And beneath the sand at Abydos, submerged in ancient water, sits a megalithic monument that looks nothing like anything its supposed builder ever constructed. The Osirion's deepest mystery is not hidden in some undiscovered chamber or encoded in missing hieroglyphics. It is standing in plain sight, submerged in water that has surrounded it for thousands of years, waiting for someone to acknowledge what the evidence clearly shows. Every massive granite block is testimony. Every precisely fitted joint is a question. Every architectural parallel to structures built over 1,000 years earlier is a direct challenge that conventional Egyptology refuses to answer. The Osirion is still there, submerged, silent, and unmoved by our arguments. It doesn't care about timelines, titles, or textbooks. It only preserves what was done, not what we wish were true. If this structure really predates the pharaoh whose name we attach to it, then Egyptian history doesn't begin where we say it does. It inherits something far older. And that means civilization didn't rise in a straight line. It peaked, declined, and was remembered only as myth. So the question isn't whether the Osirion fits our chronology. It's whether our chronology was built to survive evidence like this at all. And if one monument beneath Abydos can expose a forgotten chapter of human history, how many others are still buried, waiting for us to admit we've been wrong?